That which compels us to create a substitute for ourselves is not the external lack of objects, but our incapacity to lovingly include a thing outside of ourselves. Man is not a machine that can be remodeled for quite other purposes as occasion demands, in the hope that it will go on functioning as regularly as before, but in a quite different way. He carries his whole industry with him. In his very structure is written the history of mankind. To find out what is truly individual in ourselves, profound reflection is needed, and suddenly we realize how uncommonly difficult the discovery of individuality is. The highest, most decisive experience is to be alone with oneself. You must be alone to find out what supports you. When you find that, you cannot support yourself. Only this experience can give you an indestructible foundation. The decisive question for man is he related to something infinite or not? That is the telling question of his life. Only if we know the thing which truly matters is the infinite can we avoid fixing our interests upon futilities, and upon all kinds of goals which are not of real importance. The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. The first half of life is devoted to forming a healthy ego. The second half is going inward and letting go of it. Follow that will and that way which experience confirms to be your own. Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. Thoroughly unprepared, we take the step into the afternoon of life. Worse still, we take this step with false presupposition that our truths and our ideals will serve us at hitherto. But we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. For what was great in the morning will be little at evening, and what in the morning was true, at evening will have become a lie. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. The rational attitude which permits us to declare objective values as valid at all is not the work of the individual subject, but the product of human history. As any change must begin somewhere, it is the single individual who will experience it and carry it through. A change must indeed begin with an individual. It might be any one of us. Nobody can afford to look around and to wait for somebody else to do what he is loath to do himself. Find out what a person fears the most, and that is where he will develop next. What if I should discover that the poorest of the beggars and the most impudent of offenders are all within me, and that I stand in need of the alms of my own kindness, that I myself am the enemy who must be loved? What then? The most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. It is just these intense conflicts and their conflagration which are needed to produce valuable and lasting results. Nobody, as long as he moves about among the chaotic currents of life, is without trouble. Faith, hope, love, and insight are the highest achievements of human effort. They are found given by experience. As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. Nobody can achieve happiness through preconceived ideas. One should rather call it a gift of the gods. It comes and goes, and what has made you happy once does not necessarily do so another time. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. How important it is to affirm one's own destiny. In this way we forge an ego that does not break down when incomprehensible things happen, an ego that endures the truth, that is capable of coping with the world and with fate. Then, to experience defeat is also to experience victory. There are as many nights as days, and the one is just as long as the other in the year's course. Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. Out of evil, much good has come to me. By keeping quiet, repressing nothing, remaining attentive, and by accepting reality, taking things as they are and not as I wanted them to be. By doing all of this, unusual knowledge has come to me, and unusual powers as well, such as I could have never imagined before. Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself, or from holding certain views which others find inadmissible. How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. Whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event. The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. Nobody, as long as he moves among the chaotic currents of life, is without trouble. To ask the right question is already half of the solution of a problem. The best political, social, and spiritual work we can do is to withdraw the projection of our shadow onto others. The gods have become our diseases. I am no longer alone with myself, and I can only artificially recall the scary and beautiful feeling of solitude. This is the shadow side of the fortune of love. Nobody can fall so low unless he has a great depth. If such a thing can happen to a man, it challenges his best and highest on the other side. That is to say, this depth corresponds to a potential height, and the blackest of darkness to a hidden light. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling. Man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health. Nobody can fall so low unless he has a great depth. If such a thing can happen to a man, it challenges his best and highest on the other side. That is to say, this depth corresponds to a potential height, and the blackest darkness to a hidden light. In all chaos there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. What you resist persists. The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. I shall not commit the fashionable stupidity of regarding everything I cannot explain as a fraud. We should not pretend to understand the world only by the intellect. We apprehend it just as much by feeling. Therefore, the judgment of the intellect is, at best, only the half of truth, and must, if it to be honest, also come to an understanding of its inadequacy. I regret many follies which sprang from my obstinacy, but without that trait, I would not have reached my goal. Resistance to the organized mass can be effected only by the man who is as well organized in his individuality as the mass itself. Every human life contains a potential. If that potential is not fulfilled, then that life was wasted.